Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 20, Giro d'Italia 2022. It's the last mountain stage of this year's Giro, and there needs to be a showdown because the top three riders on the general classification are just separated by about a minute, but we're talking 3 seconds between Richard Carapaz and Jai Hindley, and then Mikel Landa, Bahrain victorious, sitting third. So today's got to be a showdown, right? When the general classification is so tight, and tomorrow is a time trial that may be a significant time trial if the same games played on yesterday's stage are played again on today's stage. Now, 168 kilometers, there's 3 massive climbs in today's stage, and it's going to summit. The last climb is incredibly hard, but you really want to focus on the last 5 kilometers of the climb because that's when it gets its steepest, and it goes all the way to the finish of today's stage 20. Now, when we go back to yesterday's stage 19 finish, it was Jai Hindley giving an interview about his team tactics. He's a little bit lost on what was happening. He says the plans changed during the course of the stage, and then we saw them ride yesterday, ride easy at points in times, giving Ineos a free ride. He was a little bit lost on his interview. It was pretty entertaining. If you get a chance, go back and catch that interview. But one thing that definitely stood out, he said all the stages before today's stage 20 were climbs that were more explosive, and they really weren't suited to his style of climbing. So he was looking forward to today's stage 20. Richard Carapaz basically said about the same thing. He said here on stage 20, we were going to get up into the high mountains and get up into the altitude. So the stage was going to benefit Richard Carapaz the most on today's stage. Now, Mikel Landa, during today's stage, he gave an interview and said, if they get on the climb together, they're going to be aggressive and try to win the Giro d'Italia here on this final mountain stage. Now, when racing starts, when we dissect the course and you see the 3 big climbs, that's obvious, right? But 20 kilometers into today's stage, there's a 3-kilometer climb. And you got to remember, we're on stage 20, like I've been telling you, so the legs are tired throughout the peloton. When the peloton starts at kilometer 0, attacks are right away from Lotto Sudol, but nothing's getting away until we hit this climb about 20K into today's stage. And it's Trek Segafredo's Giulio Ciccone who's on the march. He is stomping up the pedals, and it's Mari van Savenhoff, the quick-step rider, that's following the Trek Segafredo rider. Those guys will go over the top with about a group of 6 or 8 riders, and then the second group will merge to make 14 in the front, and in that second group, Matthew van der Poel's there. Now this group is 14, and you got 2 Jumbo-Visma riders with Sam Oomen and Hess Limraes in there. Quick Step have Davide Ballerini, who is the man of the hour throughout most of yesterday's stage, and he's got a different rider with him, though, with Mari van Savenhoff, who made the split with Ciccone. And then when we look a little bit further, you got Bahrain victorious up there with Novak, and you got Bora Hansgrohe with Leonard Kamna. Now, those aren't the only things to pay attention to because there's one other team that has 2 numbers, and it's UAE Team Emirates Davide Formula, who was super aggressive to make this split of 14, and he's got a teammate with Alessandro Covi. Covi, if you remember right, the beginning of the season, he was winning races down in Spain, and he looks like he's been coming on some form here, later stages here at the Giro d'Italia. Now, that group of 14 will become 15 because it'll be AG2R's Vendrami, the last rider, the bridge across the gap. I don't know how he did it back there on his own, but he bridged up to those 14 riders to make 15 in the front group. Behind in the peloton, we see him go spread across the road. That means this group of 15 is who we're going to have to keep an eye on early and throughout most of this stage 20 of the Giro d'Italia because Ineos don't want anything with bringing the group back together. Now, in my mind, I like this tactic to give that group as much time as possible and eliminate any time bonuses so Jai Hindley doesn't have a chance of gaining time bonuses at the end of today's stage. That looks like it's Ineos' plans until Bahrain victorious get on the front. Now, Bahrain victorious are on the front with Sutherland and Phil Bauhaus, their sprinter. Bauhaus clearly not a climber, but he's doing everything he can to help Mikel Landa out at a shot at trying to win the Giro d'Italia. Now remember, up in that front group of 15, there's Leonard Kamna from Bora Hansgrohe, and there's Novak from Bahrain victorious. I don't like these tactics. If you guys that tune in often know that I do not like putting riders in the front break from teams that are trying to vie for the win the general classification. At this moment, I understand what everybody's thinking. You got a rider you can jump across to or a rider you can pull back, but rarely do I see that happen. Most of the time, I just see the riders out there, they get tired, they fall apart, get dropped, come back, and Mikel Landa, or let's say Jai Hindley from Bora Hansgrohe, are left with no teammates in order to do any early damage here on this stage 20 with 145 kilometers still to go in today's stage. Now Phil Bauhaus will come off, and it'll be Sutherland from Bahrain Victorious that'll get on the front when the first climbing starts here, doing a magnificent job. And when we look at the back of the group, it's Wout Poels back there. Now, he's having a hard day. The climber for Bahrain Victorious is struggling on today's stage. I saw him after the first climb here. He gets popped on the next little rise in the road and comes off the back of the peloton and somehow finds his way back up to his Bahrain Victorious teammates. Now in the breakaway up front, it was Davide Ballerini again doing most of the pulling. The quick-step rider was on a mission yesterday, and he's repeating that magnificent feat again today. He pulled most of the early parts of today's stage, went pulling hard up over the Category 1, climbed throughout most of the time on the front of that group. Now when we get to the second climb here on today's stage 20, it's still Davide Ballerini on the front, but this is when we start seeing riders having troubles. It's Vendrame from AG2R, the first to come off, and then Matthew Vanderpool from Alpecin Phoenix come off next. Now with 53 kilometers to go in today's stage, and only about 2 or 3 kilometers into this second climb here on stage 20, it's Alessandro Covi that throws in a big attack from UAE Team Emirates. Now with this attack, I can only assume he's trying to set up Davide Formulo back there, their pure climber on UAE Team Emirates, who we've seen in just about every mountain stage in a breakaway here at the Giro d'Italia. So Davide Formulo now has got a free ride in the back, but there's damage happening in the breakaway back there as they're all starting to fall off the pace. Next to come off is going to be Ballerini. Then his teammate Maury van Savenok comes off with Ballerini at basically the exact same moment. So all that work Ballerini had done for his teammate Maury was coming to no good because Maury van Savenok just doesn't have the legs. Now, when you look at it on paper, you got to ask yourself if it was the correct tactic there for Ballerini to be pulling on the front so hard throughout most of the stage when it looks like his form was coming better and better throughout this Giro. Doesn't matter now because both riders are getting dropped out the back. They got some company though. Sylvain Moniquet, Lotto Sudol, he comes off. Sam Omen from Jumbo-Visma comes off. Zardini from Drone Hopper, he's the next rider to come off out of the break. And now up front, they're seeing a little bit of confusion because it's difficult to know who's going to do the work to pull back Covi. When you go up front and you look at this group of 6-7 riders up there, the only riders are Ensman from DSM. He wants Covi to come back. And of course, Davide Formulo is sitting on. Ciccone from Trek Segafredo, he'd love to bring back Covi and have a shot at winning a second stage here at the Giro d'Italia. Antonio Pedrero from Movistar, he's swinging on the back, so you know you're not going to get much help there. Now they get a little bit of luck because two of the Jumbo-Visma riders find their way back on, and Sam Omen and Hess Limraes are back in the front group when they crest the KOM. Problem is, up front with a minute and a half gap is Alessandro Covi. He's going full gas on the pedal and not hesitating for anything. He's getting food from the car, and then through every corner you see him just blazing through the corners, never letting off the pedals at all. Behind in the GC field, Ineos looks solid with Richard Carapaz. He's got teammates all around him. Bora Hansgrohe have solid numbers around Jai Hindley. So Bahrain Victorious is on the front of the peloton right now. Doesn't look like it's doing big damage. And remember, now it's just Wout Poels on the front. Sutherland had pulled off, and somehow unimaginably, Wout Poels has found a way to the front of the peloton and is pulling Mikel Landa. Now, on his wheel, he's got Santiago Buitrago there, Pello Bilbao, and then Landa sitting fourth wheel. I don't know how Wout Poels is doing it at this point in time. He looked like he was absolutely walking dead throughout all this stage, and somehow he's on the front. Now, he's not pulling any time back on the breakaway up front, but he's trying to do everything he can for his teammate Landa to try to win here at the Giro d'Italia. Hats off to you, Wout Poels. This was an amazing job to just stay in the peloton. Nonetheless, to be on the front is absolutely magical. Right now, Covi's time, though, is not dropping down. The time back to the peloton is still about 6 minutes back there to the Wout Poels-led Bahrain Victorious peloton back. Now the breakaway group behind, that's about 8 riders. It's Davide Ballerini from Quickstep. Found his way back on in descent. So you know this group up front must be playing games if Davide Ballerini found his way back up to them. He blazes right past him, goes through the corner. He's trying to go solo so he can bring back Alessandro Covi up front. They'll They'll bring him back, and then when the final climb starts, the massive Marmolada with 14 kilometers, 7.8%. We know we still got a battle. Up front, Covey's leads about 2.5 minutes on the group behind, and the peloton still being led by Bahrain victorious Wout Poels. That gap is still about 6 minutes back to those guys. Anything's possible at this point in time, but everybody's tired. We start going up this climb right away. Chiccone's trying to do everything he can. He throws in the first acceleration. We'll see Sam Omen coming out the back right away from Jumbo-Visma. He's got company with Davide Ballerini. He did an epic ride today, but he doesn't have the legs for this last 14 kilometers as the quick-step rider's coming out the back. Now behind in the peloton, Wout Poels is just finishing up his work, and he's pulling off the front of the group for Santiago Botargo to come in and try to do something magical for Mikel Landa and set a pace and blow this group up. We go back up to Covey. He's still got a solid lead. He's pushing hard on the pedal. At no point in time have we seen the UAE Team Emirates start to falter in any way whatsoever. You can tell he's a big boy. This is a steep climb, but he's still pushing hard on the pedals. He's got his director's car back there multiple times throughout his solo break at this moment, giving him encouraging words. Now, when we go back to Ciccone back there from Trek Segafredo, Ciccone's having words with our Ensman right now, trying to motivate the DSM rider because he knows that's his only companion at this point in time. When you look at this break, when you look at the numbers, Jumbo-Visma riders were dropping out the back already, so you know they're fatigued. Antonio Pedrero from Movistar, he's been dropped and reattached on the climb before here, so you know his legs are done. When you look at Formula, the only other rider that could possibly have some form, but it's his teammate up the front, Alessandro Covey, trying to go solo and win here at stage 20, so Formula's not going to pull. Novak from Bahrain victorious has been sitting on almost the whole entire time in this break while his Bahrain victorious teammates were chasing. And Leonard Kamna's got another plan, right? He doesn't have any plans. He's not trying to win today's stage, or it doesn't look like it because he's not taking a pull back there. So Ciccone's upset. He's trying to get help from our Ensman. And then finally, the DSM rider starts taking some pulls with Ciccone as they're trying to bring back the time gap on Covey. But we're halfway up this final climb with less than 7 kilometers to go, and Covey still has almost a minute and a half, 2 minute and 45 second gap on the group behind trying to chase. Now, there'll be a little bit of a dip before the final 5 kilometers start. Remember what I told you at the beginning of the stage, this last 5 kilometers, this is the most difficult, steepest section of this final climb of the Giro d'Italia left. Covey's still looking pretty spectacular on the pedals, and behind it's Novak, Bahrain victorious, that throws in the big attack. Now, we all saw this coming, right? It was either going to come from Leonard Kamna or Bahrain victorious Novak that throws in the attack, but Leonard Kamna had already been popped out the back with the efforts from our Ensman on the pedals, and now Novak is dropping Ciccone and our Ensman, the DSM rider, to go solo and try to close this gap up to Covey. Now, right away, that gap drops down to a minute, then 45 seconds, and Novak, he's still got a couple kilometers to go. But we got to go back to the GC guys because now the battle is on. Ineos have decided to take over the front with about 5 kilometers left in today's final stage, mountain stage, here at the Giro d'Italia. Ineos is on the front. First, it starts off with Sivakov just briefly because Ben Toulet comes up and decides he wants to take a pull. He rides at the front for about 1 kilometer and then blows, hands over the reins to Sivakov, and Sivakov throws down pressure on the pedals. Coming out the back, GC favorites, Vincenzo Nibali's coming out the back. Pello Bilbao from Bahrain victorious is coming out with Italian rider. And up front, the surprise of the GC favorites, Jan Hertz, is staying with the front leaders, the best riders here at the Giro d'Italia. And Hugh Carthy, EF Education's putting on a spectacular ride, making it a group of 6 up front with Sivakov leading, Carapaz on his wheel, Jai Hindley locked in solid in 3rd spot. Landa looks like he's suffering at this moment. Jan Hurt is there from Intermarché, and then Hugh Carthy from EF Education, the 6th rider up front. Now, as Sivakov starts to blow a kilometer later, it's going to be Jai Hindley that throws in a massive attack, and we see exactly why he's throwing in this attack, because only 100 meters later, it's his teammate up there, Leonard Kamna, that's waiting for him. Now, when Leonard Kamna looks back, he sees his team leader there, Jai Hindley, looks back, looks forward, gets on the pedals. The only ones left on his wheel now is Jai Hindley and Richard Carapaz. Carapaz is digging deep. Looks like he's hurting a little bit. Then all of a sudden, pop, bam, there goes Carapaz. He's off the back. Mikel Landa's in the back struggling. He's got Hugh Carthy for him, but he dropped. He was the first of the three favorites to drop. Now up front, as soon as Jai Hindley sees Carapaz comes off, he starts the acceleration. He starts blazing pressure on the pedal, and he's blowing through the remnants of the original break up front, catching them one by one and accelerating like crazy. Behind, Richard Carapaz is having a day without here on stage 20 of the Giro d'Italia. It's only less than 2.5 kilometers to go, and Richard Carapaz is coming out the back. He has no help back there, no teammates whatsoever, because remember, it was Richie Porte that dropped yesterday and abandoned the Giro d'Italia with stomach sickness, so he's got no help back there from Team Ineos Sivakov. He already used up him to pull hard and start this selection, and now his legs are falling off faster than the wagon wheel hitting the bump on the trail. As those wheels come off, Carapaz is still dropping time. We'll see him lose 30 seconds right away to Jai Hindley, who now is accelerating as fast as he can. Up front, still solo, it's going to be Alessandro Covi, UAE Team Emirates, that held off all of the breakaway riders from behind to win with about a 30-second gap on Novak, the Bahrain victorious rider who never pulled the plug and never went back for Mikel Landa. He finishes second on the stage. Third is the Trek Segafredo rider Ciccone. Now, that was at the finish line. Now we got to go back to 700 meters because Jai Hindley is still back there solo, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down. The question now isn't whether or not if he's going to finish today in pink. It's whether or not if Carapaz loses so much time that he can't make it up in tomorrow's individual time trial. Shortly, just seconds after that, we know the story because Jai Hindley never slows down. He starts accelerating with about 600 meters to go. 500 meters, he's still sprinting. 400 meters, he's pushing as hard as he can out of the saddle. He crosses the line today with his head down, every ounce of energy used on today's stage 20 to take the pink leader's jersey here at the Giro d'Italia. Now behind, what happened? Mikel Landa caught Richard Carapaz, dropped Carapaz, and went into the finish of today's stage with Hugh Carthy from EF Education to put seconds into Richard Carapaz. Carapaz, again, isolated back there with no teammates. He struggles to finish today's stage, but will hold on to second on the general classification. The problem is he's only got a 25-second advantage over Mikel Landa behind because Landa had dropped him going up this climb. And he's minute and 25 seconds on the general classification behind Jai Hindley now. So Jai Hindley at this point in time at the Giro looks like he's going to win here at 2022. Remember the last time he put the pink jersey on, because this wasn't his first time wearing pink, 2 years ago in 2020, he lost it in the time trial, but now with a minute and 25 seconds, you got to believe the Australian rider has a solid chance, almost 100% chance, if he can keep his bike upright to win here at the Giro d'Italia. The big battle for tomorrow's individual time trial is got to be whether or not Landa can move into second place on the general classification, being only 25 seconds behind Richard Carapaz. Now, when I dissect this stage, because you know this is the butterfly effect, it's not the recap show. I love dissecting the races. When you go back down to the bottom of this final climb and you see that it's Sivakov chatting alongside with Carapaz, you know they had to be talking about Carapaz. How do you feel? I feel good, Sivakov. We're going to stick to the plan. We're going to drive this, and we're going to go up the climb. Now, at 5 kilometers, when they got on the front and started driving it, at that point in time, I thought Richard Carapaz must have some legs if he's putting 2 of his teammates on the front and starting to drive it on the most difficult, steepest sections of this final climb, right? But that wasn't the case, because as soon as Sivakov pulled off the front, Jai Hindley, he must have seen his teammate Leonard Kamna right in front, because he accelerated hard and 100 meters later caught on to his teammate Leonard Kamna's wheel. Now, I told you many times, I don't like having a teammate up the road. Every once in a while, like when you see the interview here with Jai Hindley, and he talks about how today's stage was perfect. It was. It worked out fantastic. It was perfect to have Jai Hindley up in that break. But I'm telling you, I see this tactic done all the time, and so rarely does it happen. When you do the math, to have Leonard Kamna drop out of that break and meet right there at that perfect time, it's really rare, right? We got to see it 2 years ago at the Vuelta with Primoz Roglic and his teammate waiting for him then to help him secure the Vuelta win on that last mountain stage when it was Richard Carapaz going up the road solo. Now Richard Carapaz is solo back there, and he's having another tactic, basically the exact same tactic of having a teammate up the road wait and pull away and cause him to lose this year's Giro d'Italia, much like it was at the Vuelta 2 years ago against Primoz Roglic. So when you see this tactics, you got to ask yourself, is it worth the effort to have someone like Leonard Kamna up there? I don't know. I don't see it very often. But I have seen it win the Vuelta, and now I have seen it win Giro d'Italia here at 2022. Now, with that loss on today's stage from Richard Carapaz, remember when you look at Team Ineos, most likely they won't win this year's Tour de France when you're talking about the two Slovenians showing up if they're on form with Tadej Pogačar and Primoz Roglic there. They have not been able to beat those two riders during the Tour de France at any point in time during their dominance last couple seasons. So this loss here from Richard Carapaz is going to be a big blow against Team Ineos. If you remember right and you subscribe to the channel here, you remember last year when I said Ineos were talking about how fantastic of a 2021 season they had, their best ever. It was Egan Bernal who won the Giro d'Italia, and then they lost the Tour de France. So that Giro d'Italia was incredibly important to Team Ineos. Now this year, with the loss on this stage from Richard Carapaz to Jai Hindley here on stage 20, you got to ask yourself, how are Ineos going to be able to solve the 2022 dilemma of not having the big Grand Tour win on their resume when the season finishes? Now I know, and you guys know, the Tour de France hasn't started, so Team Ineos, they didn't bring their best team here for Richard Carapaz. They better bring the best team to the Tour de France, and that's what they've been waiting for. So come July, Ineos have a big objective to be able to win the Tour de France here in July because of this loss here on stage 20. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We still got one more time trial left. Yes, Jai Hindley should have it in the bag, but there's always drama in bike racing, and we never know what's around the corner. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect.